The Fateful Evening. A missing phone, traces of DNA, and a breathalyzer test at a random traffic stop. These were the threads that would finally unravel one of Italy's most puzzling murder mysteries. It was a crisp November evening in 2010 in Brembate di Sopra, a small, peaceful Italian town not far from Milan. The streets were quiet, illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. Among the 7,000 residents, 13-year-old Yara Gambirasio stood out as a bright, lively girl who had a passion for gymnastics. On this particular evening, she left her home to visit the nearby sports center, a place she frequented often, just a few hundred yards away. Her purpose was simple: to return a stereo to her coach. She promised her parents she'd be back within the hour. The clock struck 7 p.m., and Yara had not returned. At first, her parents thought nothing of it. Perhaps she'd been delayed by a conversation with her friends, or stayed to practice a little longer. By 7:11 p.m., concern turned to panic when Yara's mother tried calling her, only to hear her phone go straight to voicemail. The family's anxiety grew as every passing minute felt like an eternity. By 8 p.m., they decided to call the police. Detective Letizia Ruggeri, a seasoned investigator from a nearby city, was immediately assigned to the case. She wasted no time dispatching officers to search the streets, question witnesses, and retrace Yara's steps. Her parents were frantic, the serene facade of their tranquil town shattered by an overwhelming sense of dread. The search efforts quickly expanded. Local police were joined by the military police, firefighters, and volunteers. They combed through every possible location: the sports center, nearby streets, and even the banks of a small river that ran through the town. Witnesses reported seeing a girl resembling Yara talking to two men near a red car that evening, but the lead was tenuous and unconfirmed. Search dogs brought in to track her scent led investigators in a puzzling direction, away from her home and toward a neighboring town called Mapello. Yet whispers of something darker began to emerge. Rumors that Yara might have been seen near an abandoned industrial site in Mapello. This lead introduced a sinister twist to the investigation. A few locals claimed to have heard faint cries near the site on the evening she disappeared, but when police arrived, they found no trace of her. This haunting detail raised chilling possibilities and deepened the mystery. Hours turned into days, and days into weeks. The initial theories were grim. Either Yara had been kidnapped or, though less likely, she had run away. Her parents vehemently rejected the latter idea. Yara was a happy, grounded girl with no reason to leave. Adding to the mystery, her last known activity was a text sent to a friend at 6:44 p.m., suggesting she had planned to meet the friend the following day. Investigators scoured phone records, gathering data from 15,000 devices active in the area during the critical hours of Yara's disappearance. It was a daunting task, with officers working tirelessly to sift through the mountain of data. Despite their efforts, leads were sparse and hope began to wane. But for Detective Ruggeri, surrender was not an option. 3 months later, on February 26, 2011, a shocking discovery was made. A man flying a remote-controlled airplane in a field 6 miles from Yara's home stumbled upon a gruesome sight: human remains hidden beneath a pile of rags. The body was badly decomposed, but the clothes matched those Yara had worn the night she vanished. Her iPad, house keys, and SIM card were also found nearby, but her phone itself was missing. To complicate matters, early forensic analysis revealed fibers on the body that were traced back to a rare type of industrial fabric. The revelation sparked speculation about the possible involvement of someone connected to a local factory, a detail that would prove pivotal in the case. The quiet town of Brembate di Sopra was thrust into chaos. The disappearance of a beloved teenager had now become a murder investigation, plunging the community into an abyss of fear and heartbreak. The grim discovery sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Brembate di Sopra, leaving its residents grappling with an unshakable sense of loss. For Yara's parents, the news was nothing short of devastating. Their worst fears had been realized in the most horrific way imaginable. The peaceful, picturesque town they had always known was now cloaked in grief and haunted by whispers of fear and unanswered questions. How could something so monstrous happen in a place like this? Detective Letizia Ruggeri wasted no time arriving at the scene. The state of the body made identification difficult, but the clothing and personal belongings left no doubt. It was Yara. Forensic experts were called in to examine the remains, and the findings were heart-wrenching. Yara had been stabbed multiple times, her body left exposed to the elements for months. Although there were no signs of sexual assault, the removal of some of her clothing suggested a chilling motive investigators dared not speak aloud. As the scene was scoured, an unsettling discovery came to light. Drag marks near the body hinted that Yara's body might have been moved post-mortem. The direction of these tracks suggested a vehicle had been used, raising the possibility that her killer was methodical, calculating, and, disturbingly, familiar with the area. Adding to the mystery, footprints leading into the field abruptly stopped midway, as though whoever carried her had vanished into thin air. This eerie detail fed into whispers of something more sinister, a planned, deliberate act by someone who knew how to cover their tracks. The discovery turned the investigation on its head. The police meticulously combed the field where Yara's body was found, hoping to uncover something, anything, that could shed light on what had happened. Fibers clinging to her clothing hinted at a type of fabric commonly used in local manufacturing, sparking theories about the killer's profession. Even more crucially, forensic teams recovered 2 traces of DNA, one from Yara's gloves and another from the battery of her missing phone. These tiny fragments of evidence became their first real leads, a fragile hope to cling to. Yet progress was agonizingly slow. The DNA samples, though significant, were only partial. Forensic teams struggled to extract a complete profile, and when they finally did, the results yielded no matches in existing criminal databases. It was as though the perpetrator had simply disappeared without a trace. Each passing day felt heavier than the last, frustrating the investigators and deepening the anguish of Yara's family and the community. As time dragged on, the media descended on the town, turning Yara's case into a national obsession. Reporters flooded the area, demanding updates, while sensational headlines painted a dark picture of a country grappling with its vulnerability. Some tabloids even hinted at occult rituals or criminal syndicates, further fanning the flames of speculation. Millions of Italians followed every development, their collective hope dwindling with each passing day. For Detective Ruggeri, the pressure was unrelenting. Criticism mounted from every corner. Politicians, journalists, and even the public questioned her ability to solve the case, but she refused to back down. Every lead, no matter how small, was scrutinized. Every avenue, no matter how remote, was explored. She was determined to bring justice to Yara's family, even as the trail grew colder by the day. Months later, a glimmer of hope reignited the investigation. Forensic experts succeeded in extracting a full DNA profile from biological material found on Yara's underwear. It belonged to an unknown man, likely the killer. With this breakthrough, Letizia mobilized her team for an unprecedented operation. Officers fanned out across the region, collecting DNA samples from anyone who might have had any connection to Yara, from her family and friends to employees at the sports center. Laboratories across Italy worked tirelessly to analyze the flood of submissions, but with thousands of samples, the process was painstakingly slow. As the investigation widened, the focus shifted to Mapello, the neighboring town where Yara's phone had last connected to a cell tower. Investigators speculated that the killer had transported her by car, likely taking her life in the remote field where her body was eventually found. Surveillance footage and phone records were pored over for clues, but the puzzle remained maddeningly incomplete. Among the footage, a shadowy figure near the edge of the field at dusk seemed suspicious, but the grainy quality made it impossible to confirm any details. Meanwhile, the town's grief began to morph into something darker: fear. If such a brutal crime could happen to Yara, in a town like theirs, who might be next? Parents began keeping their children indoors, locking their doors earlier than ever before. The case became more than just an investigation. It was a test of resilience for the entire community. And for Yara's family, it was an agonizing wait for answers they desperately needed, but feared might never come. As the months dragged on, the weight of unfulfilled promises and fading hope pressed heavily on Detective Letizia Ruggeri. What had once seemed like a beacon of possibility, the killer's DNA profile, now felt like an unsolvable puzzle. Thousands of DNA samples had been meticulously collected and tested, yet every result came back the same: no match. Each passing day added to the anguish of Yara's grieving family and the simmering frustration of the community, but Letizia refused to let go. For her, failure was simply not an option. In her determination to uncover the truth, Letizia began exploring unconventional methods to generate new leads. One of these ideas centered on a nightclub not far from the field where Yara's body had been found. Known for attracting a rough crowd, the club was a meeting ground for people with criminal records and questionable reputations. Letizia suspected that the killer might have frequented the place and decided to set up a bold operation. On weekends, officers discreetly stationed themselves outside the club, collecting saliva samples from visitors entering the venue. Membership records were also cross-referenced with the timeline of Yara's disappearance, in the hope of finding some overlooked connection. For weeks, there were no breakthroughs, just the growing silence of unanswered questions. Then, one night, the laboratory delivered an unexpected call. They had found a partial match, a man named Damiano. The match suggested that Damiano's DNA was closely related to the killer's. However, Damiano himself was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Records showed he had been out of the country at the time of Yara's disappearance. Despite this setback, the discovery was significant. The killer had to be a close relative of Damiano. Letizia and her team turned their focus to Damiano's family tree. They began meticulously piecing together connections, mapping out relationships that spanned generations. This unconventional approach, reminiscent of genetic genealogy, was groundbreaking at the time. Slowly but steadily, they unraveled the threads of Damiano's ancestry, and one startling discovery stood out. Damiano's mother had once worked as a housekeeper for Yara's family. While this raised eyebrows, there was no concrete evidence linking her or her immediate family to the crime. Months turned into years as Letizia's team dug deeper. Archival records dating back to the 1700s were unearthed, revealing hundreds of relatives connected through sprawling branches of the family tree. Then came the breakthrough they had been chasing: a link to a man named Giuseppe "Geppi" Guerinoni, who had passed away years earlier. Giuseppe's DNA, extracted from personal belongings preserved by his widow, revealed a vital clue. He was almost certainly the father or grandfather of the killer, but even this lead brought new complications. Giuseppe had 2 legitimate sons, and neither matched the killer's profile. The only explanation left was one fraught with sensitivity. Giuseppe must have fathered a child out of wedlock, a secret buried in the past. The revelation sent shockwaves through his surviving family, sparking denial, outrage, and whispered accusations that deepened the mystery. Determined to uncover the truth, Letizia's team began interviewing Giuseppe's acquaintances, searching for traces of a hidden affair. The trail led to a small spa town where Giuseppe had vacationed annually without his wife. Meticulous records from the spa pointed to a woman named Esther Arzufi, who had stayed there during the same period as Giuseppe. Esther, now elderly, had 3 children, including twins, a son, and a daughter. As investigators questioned Esther, she flatly denied any affair with Giuseppe, calling the allegations absurd. But as Letizia dug deeper, inconsistencies in Esther's story emerged. Witnesses from the spa recalled seeing her and Giuseppe together on more than one occasion, exchanging looks that suggested something far more intimate than a casual friendship. The investigators turned their attention to Esther's son, Massimo Giuseppe Bossetti, a construction worker who lived in the same region as Yara. His age and profile aligned with what they knew about the killer, yet they needed solid proof. Letizia orchestrated a covert plan. Officers set up a sobriety checkpoint on a road Massimo frequently used. When stopped, he unwittingly provided a saliva sample through a breathalyzer test, which was then sent to the lab. Tensions ran high as the sample was processed, but when the results finally arrived, they were conclusive and chilling. Massimo's DNA was a perfect match for the biological material found on Yara's underwear. But the twist didn't end there. Investigators discovered that Massimo had been unusually evasive about his movements on the night of Yara's disappearance. His alibi, once watertight, began to unravel under scrutiny. A grainy CCTV clip showed a vehicle resembling his van parked near the sports center just before Yara vanished. After nearly 4 years of tireless investigation, Letizia finally had her answer. The man responsible for Yara's murder had been identified, and he had been hiding in plain sight all along. On June 16, 2014, the quiet hum of an ordinary workday was shattered at a construction site in northern Italy. Massimo Giuseppe Bossetti, a seemingly unremarkable father of 3, was taken into custody by police. As word of his arrest spread, shock rippled through the community. Neighbors and colleagues couldn't reconcile the man they knew, a hard-working family man, with the heinous crime he was accused of. His family, blindsided by the allegations, stood in disbelief. How could someone like Massimo be capable of such horror? Massimo adamantly denied the accusations. He insisted he had never met Yara and had no explanation for how his DNA had ended up on her clothing. His wife and relatives rallied behind him, vouching for his character and offering alibis. But the evidence presented by investigators painted a chilling picture that was hard to ignore. The DNA match on Yara's underwear was irrefutable. Combined with Massimo's proximity to the crime scenes, it formed the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. As the investigation deepened, more troubling details emerged. Surveillance footage from the night Yara disappeared showed a vehicle matching Massimo's near the sports complex. The car had no license plates, a deliberate attempt to avoid identification. Fibers found on Yara's clothing were analyzed and matched the upholstery of Massimo's van, further tightening the noose around him. But the most spine-chilling detail emerged from Massimo's van itself. A faint but undeniable trace of Yara's blood on the door handle, a discovery that sent shockwaves through the courtroom when revealed. Massimo's internet search history added another disturbing layer to the case. Investigators uncovered searches pointing to dark and hidden desires involving minors. While these searches weren't directly tied to Yara's murder, they painted a damning portrait of a man whose private thoughts were far from innocent. Prosecutors argued this behavior provided a sinister motive, a horrifying glimpse into a man capable of unimaginable acts. The prosecution's theory was both chilling and methodical. They argued that Massimo had been observing Yara for weeks, studying her routines and waiting for the right moment to strike. On that fateful evening, they claimed, he intercepted her as she walked home. Whether through coercion or force, he got her into his van, drove her to the remote field, and ended her life to ensure she could never identify him. Massimo's defense team fought back with everything they had. They attacked the DNA evidence, arguing that contamination or procedural errors could not be ruled out. They pointed out that the type of DNA found on Yara's clothing could have originated from a distant relative, not necessarily Massimo. They even suggested that Massimo's regular nosebleeds could have left traces of his DNA in unknown locations, a possibility they said the prosecution had failed to consider. Witness inconsistencies and conflicting accounts of the van's movements that night were also used to challenge the timeline presented by the prosecution. Then came a surprising twist that complicated the narrative even further. Sylvia, a gym instructor from the sports complex Yara attended, was revealed to have her own blood on Yara's jacket. When questioned, Sylvia couldn't explain how it got there. Her behavior after Yara's disappearance, crying all night and deleting text messages, only deepened the mystery. Speculation swirled about a potential confrontation between Sylvia and Yara before the latter's disappearance. Could Sylvia have been inadvertently involved, or was this an unrelated coincidence? While these revelations raised serious questions, they weren't enough to shift the focus away from Massimo, whose DNA remained the prosecution's strongest weapon. The trial captivated Italy, turning into a national obsession. Millions followed the proceedings, divided between those convinced of Massimo's guilt and others who saw gaps and ambiguities in the case. The courtroom itself became a battleground, with emotionally charged testimonies and forensic experts fiercely debating the evidence. Yara's parents, dignified in their grief, attended every session, silently enduring the harrowing details of their daughter's final moments. After months of testimony and deliberation, the verdict came in the summer of 2016. Massimo Giuseppe Bossetti was found guilty of Yara's murder and sentenced to life in prison. The courtroom reaction was visceral. Relief for some, outrage for others. Many supporters of Massimo argued that the evidence against him was circumstantial, and lingering questions about Sylvia and other loose ends fueled their skepticism. For Yara's parents, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but it could never undo the devastating loss they had endured. The man who had stolen their daughter's life would now spend the rest of his behind bars. Yet even with the conviction, the case continued to haunt the public, leaving unanswered questions and the eerie possibility that not all the secrets had been unearthed. Massimo Giuseppe Bossetti's conviction marked the end of an arduous and deeply emotional chapter in the investigation. Yet, for many, the case felt far from resolved. While the verdict brought a measure of closure to Yara Gambirasio's grieving family, it left behind lingering doubts and unsettling questions that would haunt public discourse for years. In a shocking twist shortly after the trial, Massimo's wife, who had stood by his side throughout the investigation, visited him in prison and made a devastating confession. She admitted that none of their 3 children were biologically his, the result of long-hidden extramarital affairs. The revelation shattered Massimo's personal life and cast a darker shadow over his character, fueling speculation about his motives and his ability to deceive. Some wondered if the betrayal could have driven Massimo to harbor a darkness that culminated in his heinous crime, while others questioned if he was simply the scapegoat for a far more sinister truth. The enigma of Sylvia, the gym instructor whose blood was found on Yara's jacket, also refused to fade. Despite multiple rounds of questioning, Sylvia's responses remained vague and unconvincing. She could not explain why she had been crying inconsolably the night Yara disappeared, or why she had deleted messages exchanged with her brother shortly afterward. Speculation deepened when an anonymous tip alleged that Sylvia had an unreported argument with Yara a week before her disappearance, though no concrete evidence emerged to support this claim. Sylvia's unexplained connection to Yara's case became fertile ground for conspiracy theories, with some suggesting she may have been an unwitting participant in a larger scheme. Adding to the controversy, a whistleblower within the forensic lab later alleged that the chain of custody for the DNA samples had been briefly broken during testing. Although an internal investigation found no irregularities, the allegation cast a shadow over the case, fueling doubts about the integrity of the evidence. Critics of the conviction argued that the prosecution had leaned too heavily on forensic data while overlooking potential leads, such as unexplored ties between Sylvia and other suspects. For Yara's parents, these controversies were an added burden. The trial had brought them some solace, justice for their daughter, but the constant media scrutiny and the swirling rumors reopened wounds they desperately wanted to heal. Yet their quiet dignity and unwavering love for Yara inspired many. Their strength became a symbol of resilience, a reminder of the human capacity to endure even the most unimaginable pain. Despite his conviction, Massimo maintained his innocence. Over the years, he filed multiple appeals, hoping to overturn the verdict. Each appeal was met with the same conclusion. The evidence against him was compelling and conclusive. But Massimo's persistent claims of innocence reignited debates about the reliability of forensic evidence and the possibility of wrongful conviction. Some argued that his unyielding denials were the hallmark of a man who had been wrongly accused, while others saw them as the calculated lies of a man unwilling to face the truth. As the years passed, Yara's story transcended the boundaries of a single crime. It became a cautionary tale, a sobering reminder of the fragility of safety and the hidden dangers that can exist in even the most idyllic of communities. Her case also highlighted the extraordinary efforts of investigators, scientists, and ordinary citizens who refused to give up until justice was served. Yet the haunting details of Yara's murder and the complex web of evidence surrounding it ensured her case would remain one of Italy's most infamous crimes. For those who followed her story, the lingering question persisted. Was justice truly served? Or was the real truth buried in layers of deceit and silence? Could there have been accomplices? Or was Massimo the lone predator he was painted to be? Yara Gambirasio's legacy is both heartbreaking and enduring. Her story continues to serve as a call to action, a reminder of the preciousness of life, the resilience of love, and the unrelenting pursuit of truth, no matter how elusive it may be. Her case, with its twists and shadows, remains a chilling testament to the mysteries that can lie beneath the surface of even the most conclusive evidence. A legacy of heartbreak and unanswered questions. Years have passed since the tragic death of Yara Gambirasio, yet her memory remains deeply etched in the hearts of her hometown and across the nation of Italy. For her family, the loss is a wound that time cannot heal, a void that no justice can ever truly fill. While the quiet streets of Brembate di Sopra have reclaimed their tranquility, the shadow of Yara's absence lingers as a constant reminder of the horrors that once shattered their peace. The laughter of children, the routines of the townsfolk, and the picturesque scenery all feel incomplete, haunted by the memory of a girl whose life was stolen too soon. Detective Letizia Ruggeri, the relentless investigator whose work led to the conviction of Massimo Giuseppe Bossetti, remains a polarizing figure. To many, her dedication and use of genetic genealogy were heroic, a testament to her resolve to find Yara's killer. Her determination ensured that Yara's story would not fade into obscurity. Yet others question the methods that brought about Bossetti's conviction, pointing to unanswered questions. Critics argue that reliance on DNA evidence, while groundbreaking, overshadowed other leads. Controversies surrounding Sylvia, the gym instructor, and gaps in the timeline spark ongoing debate, keeping the case alive in the public consciousness. Massimo himself, confined behind prison walls, continues to proclaim his innocence. For some, his steadfast denial is a chilling reminder of guilt's arrogance. For others, it raises doubts about the justice system. Despite the evidence presented in court, his life sentence has done little to quell speculation. Massimo portrays himself as a scapegoat, a victim of flawed practices. While his claims have been dismissed by courts, they resonate with a vocal group of supporters. Periodic media coverage fuels theories and old questions, keeping the case in the public eye. Yara's case profoundly impacted Italy's criminal justice system, exposing the power and limitations of forensic science. The groundbreaking use of genetic genealogy marked a turning point, showing how advanced technology could uncover hidden truths. It has inspired investigators worldwide to adopt similar techniques. Yet, the case also revealed the emotional toll on families seeking answers, investigators pursuing justice, and communities grappling with fear. It underscored the balance between innovation and human intuition, showing even advanced methods are not infallible. For Yara's parents, the years have been a delicate balance between honoring their daughter and carrying on. Their quiet resilience has inspired many. Instead of letting grief consume them, they have become advocates for child safety and community vigilance. Channeling their loss into a mission to protect others, they established initiatives in Yara's name, fostering awareness about child protection and encouraging dialogue about the responsibilities communities bear in safeguarding their most vulnerable members. Their strength is a beacon of hope, showing love can persevere even in tragedy. Despite the closure brought by the conviction, haunting details of Yara's murder linger. Questions remain unanswered, and debates about the investigation's integrity persist. Was justice truly served, or are truths still buried? Could there have been accomplices or overlooked evidence? The case is a stark reminder of justice's complexities and the fragile line between certainty and doubt. Yara's story is far more than a tale of crime and punishment. It is a sobering reminder of innocence's fragility and the hidden dangers that lurk even in peaceful places. It is also a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice, a pursuit often messy and painful but essential. Her case serves as a cautionary tale, urging communities to remain vigilant, never take safety for granted, and advocate for justice for those who cannot speak for themselves. For those who followed her story, Yara Gambirasio is more than a name in a case file. She was a vibrant girl, full of dreams, laughter, and promise, a life stolen too soon. Her legacy remains a haunting echo, urging communities to protect children, cherish loved ones, and seek truth, no matter how elusive. In this way, Yara's spirit endures, a force reminding the world of what was lost and must never be forgotten. The strength of her family and the resilience of her community ensure Yara's name will never fade, a symbol of hope, love, and justice in the face of unimaginable loss.